Hello. Happy Sanctuary Day, everyone. Hello. Good to see you. All right, so this is the first reflection in a series on losing the map and finding the compass. We've all been feeling a little lost lately, I think. It's wild out there, guys. So I've been thinking about the maps that I've inherited, and so this is about that. Kai Cheng Tom says, notice where you disagree with people you admire. Notice where you disagree even with yourself. How can you allow multiple truths to exist within one heart? What becomes possible when you do? In 1845, Henry David Thoreau made Walden Pond famous by building a cabin on its shores. He wrote a book. I brought a prop, about the 2 years that he lived there, which he creatively called Walden. The book describes Walden Pond in detail, the perfectly clear water, its serene surface reflecting the blue of the sky or the green of the trees, the flora and fauna at different times of year. He even includes a literal map he made of the pond's depth at various points. The book also describes Thoreau's transcendentalist outlook on the world, on life, and on spirituality. Unitarian Universalism owes a lot of its best and worst ideas to the Transcendentalists, including Thoreau. The Transcendentalists believed that each person has a spark of divinity within them, and that each of us should take great care in recognizing and tending to that spark. I see Mara sparkling over there. They believed that worship shouldn't be boring, amen, and they thought spirituality should be moving and mystical, not just rational and intellectual. They were abolitionists, which we love to see, and as evidenced by Thoreau's choice to skip town and live simply by the pond, the Transcendentalists believed that we can and should find divinity and wisdom in nature, and perhaps also we should stick it to the man. Like, what's not to like? For sure. Unfortunately, actually, there are some things not to like. The back of my copy of Walden reads, his protest against the government's interference with civil liberty has inspired many to embrace his philosophy of individualism. Yeah, Thoreau is a raging individualist. It's a bummer. So there's a reasonable case to be made for just ditching the guy. He is kind of full of hot air. A lot of the stuff he says has not aged well. And he totally screwed Unitarians over by handing us down this massive problem with authority. Like, as a kid, I was always correcting or arguing with my teachers. And I was often right, I will say. And my mom still makes fun of me for, as a toddler, always saying, I do it self. So yeah, I have some deep-seated problems with authority, and I think that Thoreau and his buddies have a little something to do with it. The thing with ditching Thoreau is that, like it or not, I have a lot in common with him. He was 27 when he built his cabin, which is the same age that I am. He was a dreamer who loved to complain about institutions. He was deeply spiritual, thoughtful about divinity, and totally obsessed with the goodness of nature and of people. And now that I'm working toward becoming a UU minister, I do feel a need to reckon with him. Sanctuary's very own Reverend Martha Durkee Newman speaks about our chosen and inherited faith. It is ours to choose without coercion, and it's ours to leave without guilt. Fun fact, Thoreau and Emerson left the church. But now that I've chosen it, I inherit the full package, problematic faves and all. Whether I like Thoreau or not, he is part of the package that I lovingly choose and inherit. I choose it in part because I know that if I'm going to be part of something, I'm going to be part of something imperfect. So I come back to Kai Cheng Tom's words. Notice where you disagree with the people you admire. Notice where you disagree even with yourself. How can you allow multiple truths to exist within one heart? What becomes possible when you do? So yes, Thoreau was a raging individualist, but he also disagreed with himself. I know at least some of you have heard the rumor that Thoreau's mom did his laundry. Have you heard this rumor? Yeah, so it's just a rumor, but it's totally plausible. Most importantly, though, they just hung out a lot, his mom and him and his sisters. They would chat about abolitionism and help each other out with money and stuff that needed doing. They were interdependent. A quick side note to say, Cynthia Dunbar Thoreau, Henry's mom, was a founding member of the Concord Female Anti-Slavery Society. She was a total badass in her own right and should be remembered for more than her son's laundry. Okay, back to Henry's interdependence. Thoreau wouldn't have been able to build the Walden Pond cabin, if his buddy, Ralph Waldo Emerson, hadn't given him the land to use. And in the actual book, Thoreau writes a chapter called The Village and a chapter called The Company, where he talks about his community. Even this raging individualist couldn't and wouldn't opt out of interdependence. It turns out individualism is just a lie, but freedom is not a lie. You can't opt out of interdependence by living next to a pond, but you might feel a little more free out there. You can't opt out of interdependence by bad-mouthing institutions, but you can help everyone get more free by holding institutions accountable and supporting leaders who work for everyone's freedom and flourishing. You can't opt out of interdependence, but you can be free. The truth is, we're more free together. I read this book, Walden. I read Thoreau's book, Walden, for the first time this fall. And after I finished it, I went to the actual Walden Pond for the first time. It's only about 20 minutes down the road from Boston. It was the day after Thanksgiving, and the parking was free as part of the Go Green for Black Friday initiative in Massachusetts. The day was cold and clear. I read the info placards about Thoreau's significance to philosophy, literature, and ecology, and stood inside the recreated version of his cabin. It's pretty cool. When I crossed the street and reached the edge of the pond, I listened to the sound of water gently lapping against the shore. Looking across the pond, the surface reflected the blue of the sky, but looking into the water I could see was perfectly clear. When I was reading Walden's extensive descriptions of the pond, part of me was like, okay, man, we get it. Like, that's enough pages about the color of the water. But standing at the edge of the pond, I understood the compulsion to keep trying to describe the indescribable. I started walking along the path and found some boulders placed as stairs down to the water. It's a good place to sit and think about nature and about Thoreau, about his book. But the illusion of solitude was interrupted by families walking on the path behind me. From a little down the path, I heard a child exclaim, "Look, another one!" I realized as she ran toward me that she was referring to the opening in the fence between the path and the pond, where I was sitting. She and a smaller boy, probably about 7 and 5, climbed down onto the rock next to me. I scooched over to make a little room, and they sat down. They were completely unbothered by literally touching my leg. They're like, "This is fine." I asked them, "Are you climbing down every opening, like in the fence?" "Uh-huh," the younger boy said. Not every opening, the older girl corrected. I just like to be free. The first time she said it, I wasn't sure that I heard her right. But as their family approached, she said it again. I just like to be free. A tired-sounding man stopped and addressed the kids. You know, I've kind of had enough of this. I felt a pang of empathy for the kids, scolded for having too much fun at the pond. But I also felt for the man, their dad, I assume. I wondered if his in-laws were in town for Thanksgiving. I wondered if he was hungry or cold, or just wanted to get back to the car. But still, I was pretty sure that those kids had not had enough of this. I'm not that older sister at the pond. My boots were not as cool or as sparkly as hers. But I do like to be free. Thoreau liked to be free. Unitarian Universalists like to be free. What if I allowed multiple truths to exist within one heart? What if I can disagree and admire? Be interdependent and free? What might be possible? Notice where you disagree with people you admire. Notice where you disagree even with yourself. Try on allowing multiple truths to exist within your one heart. May we each remember that individualism is a lie, but that freedom can be found in our interdependence. Blessed be.